Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Liminal Space by T.S. Simons, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Not long now. Fraser's smug grin was blatantly clear from his tone. I could sense it even as I was focused on the shovel laden with dirt in the garden bed I was heaving. Excited? Absolutely shitting myself, I confessed, glancing up, momentarily blinded by the haze of the orange sun setting behind him, blurred from the dome's transparent fabric. But I would never tell her that. It seemed ludicrous that I would be the one fearful in this situation. I didn't want to admit that it was the massive leap into the cavern of the unknown that kept me awake at night. Curiosity got the better of me, and pausing in my work, I looked across at him and asked, "What's it like, being a father?" "All I can say is that it is quite a ride." Fraser, now with two daughters of his own, toddler Naeem and newborn Iona, was in an excellent position to make an assessment. "My friend, your life will never be the same." "Ugh, please don't say ride," I grimaced. Vivid Technicolor flashbacks of the horrendous journeys I had taken through the Antipodean portal between August Island off the southern coast of New Zealand and Lewis in the Scottish Outer Hebrides flashed before my eyes, temporarily disabling me from my work. The third and final journey from Belcamp Island to Newgrange, Ireland on the equinox a year ago had been even more traumatic, especially the midpoint. Each time I had not only thought I was going to die, but I had fervently wished for death. Death was decidedly preferable to that. I shuddered again. I was lucky. Until the last few years, I had lived in a comparatively safe time of human history, a time where medicines were readily available, and disease didn't wipe out complete villages in the space of a week. Despite the waterborne protozoa that had obliterated nearly the entire human population in the comparatively short period of a year, I had never actually been near death. But, swirling through the vortex, feeling my limbs being stripped of their muscles, sinew, and tendon, knowing I was being torn apart, I had wished to be dead. The first time I had traveled had been a genuine accident, and that had been the most harrowing, not knowing what had happened and wondering if it would go on forever. The second time had been a deliberate attempt to find my first wife, Freya, and the last time to return to Letitia. Gorgeous, sweet Letitia, who was now very pregnant with our first child. She looked much like a ripe cherry, glowing and fit to burst, but cheerful despite her size and evident discomfort. "Any hot tips on parenting?" I asked Fraser only half-heartedly. I wasn't sure that I wanted to know, but I also didn't want to dwell on the antipodal passage any more than entirely necessary. Fraser's face instantly lit up with such glee that it startled me. Sitting back on his heels, he rubbed his hands together joyously. I had opened Pandora's box. Just as I was about to blurt, "I was only joking," he began his jubilant monologue. "Get used to no sleep. Some kids don't sleep through the night for years. So start practicing now by setting your alarm every hour, getting up and walking around, then trying to get back to sleep just in time for the next alarm to go off. Sunset is the witching hour. They scream and cry and you will get nothing done, so don't even plan it. Get used to everything smelling like baby. Little Iona's smell permeates everything, man. Clothes, furniture, even your hair. I think it is a biological thing, so you don't forget them and accidentally leave them somewhere. Before Naeem, I never knew that babies had a scent, but seriously, man, they do. Everything smells like them." After a pause, he continued, "Oh, you will never again be able to speak to your partner without being interrupted. Speaking in broken sentences and interpreting each other's facial expressions is key here. I think this might be practiced for when they are older and you want to talk about something that you don't want them to understand, so learn secret code now. Don't even bother cleaning anything, because the minute you do, they will vomit everywhere. Ever heard the expression hella spew? Number threes?" Reacting to my nonplussed face, he cackled and taunted. "Well, get used to it, buddy. This is your new normal." Seeing my bewildered expression, Fraser's face softened somewhat as he smiled. "Man, when I was where you are now, expecting my first, I was absolutely shitting my shorts. I had no idea what to expect. But the truth is, you can never really prepare for it. You just adapt. Despite the challenges, the sleepless nights, and the turmoil, they are the most amazing magical creatures. You don't think you could love them more than they do something tiny, like smile at you with their enormous eyes fixated on you, and your heart just dissolves into a pile of mush. You would defend them with your life, armed with nothing more than a toothbrush. Like if a bear came to attack your child, you know without question that you would fight it off bare-handed just to protect them. I had seen this side of Fraser when he was around his daughters. Soft, nurturing, gentle, different from his usually outgoing and somewhat forceful personality. I would hate to be the boyfriend of one of his daughters, I thought with a snort. When he was near his children, Fraser morphed into something else. A father, I realized. Self-doubt crept into the dark recesses of my mind. Would I be a good father? What was a good father anyway? My own parents had been loving, firm, yet always supportive. As a child, I had thought of them as very harsh, making us do chores and helping with household maintenance. Until my mid-teens, I thought I had it tough compared to my friends who seemed to cruise through life gifted with everything they wanted and a lot of free time in which to get into trouble. Mom, with the control of a well-seasoned regimental sergeant major, controlled our time with jobs and wouldn't let us even watch TV until we had done our allocated chores for the weekend. Mom was the boss. Dad, being a shift worker, often worked weekends, but it was Mom who didn't allow slacking off until the work was done. Once we had finished, she would tell us, "Your time is your own." All of us had a list, and no matter how much we whined or complained we were sick or tired, Mom ensured we finished it. It wasn't until I lived on August that I realized what my parents had instilled in us was a strong work ethic, something taught over a long period. They had treated us as equal members of the family and therefore needed to understand both the enjoyable things but also the responsibilities. We knew we needed to maintain things or do basic jobs like emptying bins, vacuuming, walking the dog, or mowing lawns. Bills needed to be paid and came as a priority over recreational spending. They included us in plans for saving for big holidays or a new car. As a family unit, we chose what we would cut out, things like takeaway meals and trips to the cinema to save for our family projects. Sorsha and I valued our free time as we felt we had earned it. Both she and I had held down part-time jobs while studying, something few of my friends were able to do. My parents had taught me the value of prioritizing. I knew that if I tackled a task, I had to do it well and complete it. Mom's mantra was, do it well, do it once. It had taken me a very long time to work out what she meant, but now I always worked with this in mind. Letitia had grown up with no such role models, yet bizarrely she too had a strong work ethic. Hers, unlike mine, rose from being the primary caregiver for her alcoholic mother. Likely she had done far more than I ever did, but I guiltily suspected that I had complained about my allocated chores far more. Memories of faking illness, doing a crappy job by rushing it, made me ashamed. Pleading that I was too sick to walk the dog crossed my mind. Mom, resolute, demanding that it be done regardless, and on one embarrassingly memorable occasion even handing me a sick bag to take with me, just in case. A pang for my parents wrenched my heart for the millionth time. I fervently wished they were here to welcome their grandchild and help guide us on this parenting journey. If only I could thank them for teaching me so many useful things that had stood me in good stead here. I had life skills, thanks to them. All those weekends spent helping Mom and Dad maintain the house and later building the cottage on our holiday block of land meant I had learned skills without even realizing it. Leigh was quite unperturbed with the concept of impending motherhood, despite having no siblings of her own. We were close to Fraser and Isla, so perhaps she had learned what to do by watching Isla and the other mothers here, or maybe it was just innate knowledge in a woman. Parenthood was such an abstract concept for a man. Your partner gets fatter and fatter, then boom, baby. She has months to get used to the idea. Infinitesimal movements, tiny kicks, an indicator of the change to come. When I asked her curiously what it felt like, she described it as like the flutter of a butterfly inside her belly or a quick jerk on a fishing line. 1 second it is there, the next, gone, making you question whether you really felt it at all. For a man, it goes from being a theoretical concept to a noisy, messy reality within minutes. Sure, you get to feel the occasional kick or squirm with a strategically placed hand on her bulging stomach, but it wasn't quite the same. For men, it is a life-changing moment, quiet life, to crying baby, all in the space of minutes. Finishing my work in silence, I thought as I did now and then of my childhood, my sister. Sorcia, her own tragedy still so recent in the death of her fiancé when I had left, hadn't lived to become a parent or an aunt. All because she had asthma and I didn't. The luck of the draw, that one. Why does one child inherit an illness and the other doesn't? Despite looking alike, both tall and muscular, inherited from our father, she was red-haired, inherited from our mother, while I was dark-haired like Dad. But it was Sorcia who had inherited Dad's asthma, whereas I had not. Watching Fraser pulling potatoes in the garden bed adjacent to my own, I realized that my mother would have had the most terrible case of granny lust, that condition when an older woman desperately wants to become a grandparent. No one would have been permitted to hold her grandchild while my mother still had functional arms. I smiled, thinking of my mother. The long red plait down her back, swishing as she weeded her garden, bustled around the kitchen. I had the sudden image of my mother smiling down at a baby she cradled in her arms, wrapped in a blanket. A memory. Whose baby was it? Racking my brain, I couldn't place the image. It just hadn't seemed important at the time. Another one of her friends or colleagues had given birth. I hadn't really paid any attention. Now I would have given my right arm to see her smiling down fondly at her own grandchild, my child. Spoiling him or her in a way that you can't with your own children, allegedly. 10 months ago, I had returned to Lewis after traveling through the portal on Belcamp Island off the coast of New Zealand to Newgrange, Ireland. The Newgrange residents had a productive and friendly reciprocal relationship with their antipodal neighbors and had welcomed me wholeheartedly. They used the portal mainly to share cargo, but people braved the journey as well. Initially happy to rest, eat, and socialize, they had wanted to know everything about August Island and Lewis, Scotland, the two communities I had lived in. Although I was only there for 3 days, I would find myself continually retelling the stories of my adventures. The hot springs with the Celtic symbols on August where I first came through. The welcoming community in Scotland centered near the standing stones of Callanish. A few of the Irish had been to Callanish on holidays. Geographically, it just wasn't that far, at least not by Australian standards. Like most Irish, they were friendly, outgoing, and loved to chat. On my final evening, they had summoned me to the home of Kevin O'Sullivan to recount my tales. A studious-looking man in his early 30s, he was graying at the temples of his dark hair, making him appear older than he was. Despite his unassuming manner, it was clear from the respect shown to him by the other residents that he was a leader of sorts. Not officially. None of the communities I had visited had a democratically elected leader, but he had that aura of a natural leader. People followed his instruction, listened when he spoke, looking up to him and seeking his guidance. He was a born leader, whether he or not he realized it. Settled in his cozy study, Kevin had listened intently to my tale, but he had not interrupted or acted surprised. Respectful and pleasant, I knew from my conversations with Blake on Belcamp that nothing I told him was a surprise. They knew about antipodal points, what the journey was like, the feeling of discovering another community of survivors at the opposite end of the world. My fantastical tale of traveling across the globe on the days of the solstices, approximately 20,000 kilometers in the space of minutes, was one they knew themselves, and for some of them, from personal experience. When I had reached my conclusion, he leaned back in his chair and surveyed me thoughtfully. Waiting for what he would say, I watched him. His face was calm and betrayed no thought or emotion. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, and I found this fascinating. Everyone who knew me had said that everything I thought showed on my face the second I was thinking it. It meant I was a shocking liar, but it had taken me years to work this out. Mom had laughed hysterically the day I finally realized that she had always been able to tell when I was lying to her. Finally, Kevin had spoke. We had wondered if there were other portals like Newgrange. He waved his arm toward the enormous ancient complex, the community being several kilometers to the east. We speculated that we were the only ones, but now, he paused. How fantastic to think there is a network of such passages. That our ancestors knew of this and used it to travel to places that must have appeared unreal to them. You said that there were picked markings in the cave on your island. August, you called it? Nodding, I had replied. There were 2 large menhirs, upright stones, both with spirals and triquetra, very similar to the ones here at Newgrange. I'd been here before. Many years ago, my mother was, I corrected, a teacher, and she loved ancient Celtic sites, especially stone circles. We came to Newgrange on one of our trips back to visit family. I must admit, though, I didn't appreciate it at the time. Kevin smiled. I too have been to Callanish. The strange thing is there are no markings at Callanish. You are right, there aren't, but Callanish was buried for centuries under the peat. I had wondered... I stopped, not wanting to appear foolish. I wasn't a historian or an archaeologist. Kevin's sparkling blue eyes, bright and receptive over his dark beard, graying ever so slightly round his chin, had encouraged me to continue. Well, I just wondered, if the sites were always a point of travel, generations of people must have known. The Picts, the Celts, the Norse, Romans even. How many Callanish become lost for so many centuries? Newgrange is Neolithic, Kevin said, thoughtfully scratching his beard. Before 3200 BCE, it is thought. Older than the pyramids of Egypt by 600 years and older than Stonehenge by nearly 1,000 years. Historians estimate it took a team of 300 men over 30 years to build. But did you know that the menhirs, the standing stone circle that surrounds Newgrange, are much newer? Bronze Age, it is believed. Answering your question, many generations knew that this was a special place because they built it in stages. The carvings are probably Neolithic. We often attribute them to the Celts, but in reality they are far older. Seeing the quizzical look on my face around the different periods of history, he explained. In the 19th century, the three-age system was developed. Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age were based on the tools and artifacts that were discovered from each period. It wasn't long until other archaeologists added further classifications. One of them described the Stone Age as further broken up into the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic periods. Historians use the terms somewhat interchangeably. Contemplating this aloud, I asked, so if Newgrange is Neolithic, which I assume is at the end of the Stone Age, and the monoliths are Bronze Age, then the markings are Neolithic, not Celtic then? Kevin nodded, not interrupting, but standing and reaching for a well-worn volume on his bookcase, flipping pages as I contemplated this. So was there a long gap between the Neolithic period and the Bronze Age? Well, no. The periods overlapped as the development of tools was slightly different in each region. But what you are saying is that for several thousand years people knew this place was special. Kevin nodded but said nothing, recognizing my statement for what it was, musing aloud, not a question.